वंडरफुल। सबसे पहले गुरु जी को बहुत बहुत गुरु जी के चरणों में प्रणाम, गुरु जी को नमस्ते, और आई हुई सारी संगत को वेलकम करते हुए और आरती को वेलकम करते हुए आज। And such a beautiful book that you have written, and it's amazing. Actually, आज ही आंटी ने मुझे बताया, and I knew that you had written. And can you believe I was just flipping on my online, and I said, "Wow, wonderful! I've never read it all, but I am going to finish it all soon." But it is so amazing. I didn't know that you were such a prolific writer. Itna acha you write, you can put your thoughts on the paper, and the flow of language is different, but अंदर की feelings जो होती है उसको उतारना is the hardest part for a guru, especially writing something what you feel about your guru is the hardest thing. And you have done a wonderful job in your book Tu Hi Tu. And what I like the most is Tu Hi Tu, God, to my God, and how you put Guruji on duty. And that is so true. It is so amazing. That's one thing which really caught my eye. And I feel that's how we all should think, that Guruji is always on duty for his Sangat all the time. So it's amazing. And I can go on and on, but I guess I should just let you do all the talking. And so nice to see you. And go ahead, my partner in reading Shippuran also. I'm so proud of you. And just start your reading. Aarti will be reading Tu Hi Tu, chapter 13 and 14. Is amazing chapters. And it's almost the tail end of your book, almost looks like.
Anji.
So, okay, Aarti, it's all yours now. Jai Guruji.
Thank you so much, Auntie. What a pleasant surprise. I think I have to say that this platform has had an excellent line of openers and facilitators. Every week I get a surprise, and that's so heartwarming. So Anantam Shukrana. Shukrana to Guruji, Shukrana to the Sevadars of this platform for giving me this opportunity. Auntie is right. Jaise Auntie ne bataya, this is almost the tail end. This is the second last session. Next week, or whenever we decide to read, probably Monday, will be the final session. Today, I will be reading chapters 13 and 14. और थोड़ा सा recap कर लेते हैं कि कल के chapters में basically मैंने सत्संग के through ये emphasize किया है that Guruji is always around to help his devotees, and to truly realize that help. एंड हेल्प का मतलब ये नहीं कि जो हम मांग रहे हैं वो हमें मिलता जा रहा है तो हेल्प है, अगर नहीं मिल रहा तो हेल्प नहीं है. हेल्प का मतलब गुरुजी की डेफिनेशन में अगर गुरुजी आपको कुछ दे रहे हैं या कुछ नहीं दे रहे, वो आपको हमेशा हेल्प कर रहे हैं. लेकिन आई थिंक आवर पर्सपेक्टिव चेंजेस विद faith, our perspective changes with bhakti, our perspective changes with bhav. And जैसे हम कहते हैं ना कि देखने में और दर्शन में फर्क होता है, और वो फर्क होता है प्रेम का, प्रेम भक्ति, प्रेम भाव. और मैं गुरबानी में सुन रही थी, and it was, it just stayed with me because the meaning was so beautiful. उन्होंने बताया बानी में that जो प्रेम अक्षर भी है, अगर आप उसको देखो तो वो बना है परे मैं, और इसका डीपर मीनिंग ये है कि जब मुझसे मैं परे हो जाता है तो मेरे अंदर तू बस जाता है, क्योंकि जब मैं है तो तू नहीं, और अब तू है तो वो मैं नहीं. सो शुरू करते हैं गुरुजी की आज्ञा से. तू ही तू, Chapter 13, which is Time and Tide Wait for No One. Yeah, 13 and 14, I think, are the longest chapters in the book. So it's going to be a long session today. As 2020 came to a close, I couldn't help but reflect on the challenging year it had been. The finalization of my divorce, settling into my new home, and dealing with my erratic emotions left me feeling like an emotional wreck. throughout it all, Victor stood by me unconditionally, and I felt immensely grateful for his support. Amidst all the difficulties, the real miracle was that I managed to keep my faith in Guruji intact. In fact, these tribulations even strengthened it more. Guruji's presence and guidance were the pillars that held me up during those trying times. Without him, I knew I would have been utterly lost. My focus on Guruji became more profound than ever before, and his love and blessings kept me going. So, 2020 was a very difficult year, I think, globally for many, many people in ways more than one. And in the chapters yesterday, I covered, there was a lot of change coming my way, and I felt very emotionally drained, and that was the first time when I actually started to look for signs, and I was looking to get some sort of a validation, which I normally don't, because I just know he's there. But in those moments of hopelessness, when I was seeking him, how through, the most random channels, he reached out to me. I got a message, and, I hope till this date that I hope I interpreted that message correctly. And the beauty about all these trials and tribulations that came my way was the fact that my faith in Guruji multiplied many, many folds when I did not even think that it's possible. जैसे हम रोज गुरुजी के बारे में कुछ नया सुनते हैं और हम it's like कि जैसे आइसबर्ग होता है ना, हमें तो सिर्फ एक टिप ऑफ द आइसबर्ग पता है, और it's like उनकी ग्रेस की गहराई को संगत जी हम फैथम नहीं कर पाते. एंड उन्होंने वो भरोसा दान दे रखा, और उसी बल पे, like I always say, that I am because he is. One of my most significant desires was to have my parents by my side, living with me in our new home, so we could face my father's battle with cancer together. Each passing week brought more uncertainty and the diminishing likelihood of my father being able to travel overseas. Yet we clung on to the flickering hope in our hearts, and that hope was nurtured and kindled by Guru Sahib himself. His divine presence kept us going, and we entrusted everything to him, knowing that he would take care of us. In Feb of 2021, my dad's health took a serious downturn, and he had to be admitted to Medanta Hospital in Gurgaon. As a cancer patient, he needed to see the doctor frequently, but each time he went, he carried Guruji's juttis with him, despite being in and out of the hospital regularly. My dad miraculously never contracted COVID, even during the severe second wave in India. Now, those of you who remember that India, was down on its knees during 2021 when the second wave of COVID hit. Like, it was going to the hospital, in and out of the hospital every second day. और इंडिया के हॉस्पिटल्स ऐसे होते हैं जैसे रामलीला का कोई ग्राउंड हो. और आप इमेजिन करिए संगत जी that a stage 4 cancer patient जिसके अंदर कोई अच्छे जो हेल्दी लोग होते हैं, अगर वो कोविड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कर लें तो इम्यूनिटी बिल्कुल खत्म हो जाती है. जिस बंदे की बिल्कुल इम्यूनिटी वैसे ही ना हो और उसको कोविड हो जाए तो we all know that it could have been fatal. And despite his frequent trips in and out of the hospital, surprisingly, Papa never contracted COVID. Or literally ghar mein, every person you could think of, every person that you knew, sab yehi bol rahe the ki somebody or the other in the household was down with COVID. And I just feel very strongly that wo jo Jutti Prasad main wapas leke gayi thi, because I strongly, felt that my parents needed that more than me at that point in time, was his protection. Around this time, my daughter Anya was turning 16, and I wanted to celebrate her milestone birthday at home, albeit on a small scale due to the circumstances. we were unsure if the celebration could take place because of my dad's hospitalization, but I assured Anya that Guruji would not let her down. If my dad got discharged, we would proceed with her birthday celebration as planned. Even during his hospitalization, we would sometimes hear my dad talking about Shiv Puran, and he requested the Mahagranth, the holy book, to be read during his stay. True to Guruji's grace, my dad was discharged from the hospital and Anya's Sweet 16 celebration took place as she had wished. On March 1st, 2021, I decided to fly back to India again the very day itself, planning to stay for about 10 to 12 days. Before leaving, I wrote a private letter to Guruji expressing my heartfelt request for him to stay with me and enable me to bring my parents to the US soon. I left the letter under Guruji's charan in my home, Darbar. So, like I said, that February of 2021, Papa ki health plunged quite a bit. And he was hospitalized, or unki hospital ke stay mein bhi, dad would constantly keep asking for Shiv Puran, ke Shiv Puran yahan le aao. और उन्हीं दिनों में March 1st को मेरी बेटी आन्या का 16वां बर्थडे था, and Sweet 16 is a big deal here. But we didn't want to, throw a big party given the circumstances that, I was going through at that point in time. So she had a very small guest list and she said, कि Mama, इतने से लोगों की अगर party कर लेंगे, I'll be very happy if we can do something in the basement. And I said, sure, I don't mind hosting, but I will not feel right about hosting a party knowing that my father is in the hospital. बट मैंने उसको ये कहा, ऐसे मेरे को पता है कि तेरी ये डिजायर है एंड गुरुजी इज नॉट गोइंग टू लेट यू डाउन. आई एम श्योर दैट बिफोर योर बर्थडे नानू इज गोइंग टू कम बैक होम, एंड श्योर इनफ ही डिड. सो वी वेंट अहेड विद द पार्टी. और मैंने सोचा दैट राइट आफ्टर हर पार्टी इज डन आई एम गोइंग टू फ्लाई टू इंडिया टू स्पेंड अबाउट 10 to 12 days, क्योंकि मेरे को लग रहा था कि उनकी कंडीशन काफी खराब हो रही है. सो जाने से पहले संगत जी मैंने किसी को नहीं बताया, मैंने कुछ लाइनें गुरुजी के लिए लिखी और सच्चे सुच्चे भाव से मैंने गुरुजी के चरणों के नीचे रख दिया. और उसमें सिर्फ यही था कि गुरुजी कृपा करना, साथ रहना. और मेरी ये जो डिजायर, जैसे मैंने कल भी बताया था कि जब मैंने नया घर लिया तो मेरे को बस यही था कि इस घर में मम्मा पापा कब आएंगे. लेकिन वो कोविड के टाइम ट्रैवल नहीं, उसी टाइम कैंसर, तो वो रे ऑफ होप डिमिनिश सी होती जा रही थी कि कभी पॉसिबल भी होगा कि नहीं. सो ये छोटा सा खत लिखकर मैं उसी रात निकल गई. When I reached India on March 3rd, 2021, I had to go with my dad to meet the head of oncology at Medanta. My mom and I decided that I would take my dad along with our domestic aide to see the doctor. Despite his frailty and significant decline in health since I saw him last in October 2020, he held Guruji's Jutti Prasad close to his chest with utmost care and caution during the visit. All of us went to the hospital, leaving Dad and our domestic aide sitting outside. I entered the head of oncology's cabin alone. It was the most painful and dreadful conversation to have. So I left the States, and States is a day ahead. मेरे को अभी तक याद है कि March 3, 2021 पापा की अपॉइंटमेंट थी Medanta में with the head of oncology, and I remember his name. His name was, or is, I don't know if he's still there or not, Dr. Ashok Vaid. तो उस अपॉइंटमेंट के लिए मैंने कहा कि पापा को मैं लेकर जाऊंगी. And we took our domestic aid. पापा ने गुरुजी की जूतियां अपने साथ रखी हुई थी. और जब हम हॉस्पिटल पहुंचे तो मेरे पापा को बोला कि पापा तो व्हील चेयर पे आ गए थे. He was so frail that he couldn't walk. So I said, I told Chotu, जिसको हम साथ में लेके गए थे, कि पापा के साथ तुम बैठो. And they were outside, and I went into the doctor's cabin alone to have that conversation. I did not know what he's going to say, what's the next course of action, but that was the conversation I wanted to have. The doctor sat me down and straightforwardly said, I am sorry to share with you that there is nothing else we can possibly do for your father is just a matter of days. Those words hit me like bullets, piercing through my heart and brain. Gathering myself together, I responded, so you are saying we just sit and watch him die as the days go by? We'll be left wondering whether it'll happen today or tomorrow. After a pause, I added, I would like to take my father back to the US with me. I'll finish reading this and then I'm going to explain the actual conversation, because translating it in English just doesn't do justice, and I want to be able to share that verbatim with you all. He looked at me as if I had horns coming out of my head. With angst and disbelief in his eyes, he said, you want to take a stage 4 cancer patient who God only knows has hours or days left with no lungs on a long flight from Gurgaon to New Jersey? Even people with healthy lungs have a hard time breathing, flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet. How do you think he will manage? He went on to say, I cannot approve of this. The airline will not take him without my clearance, and I will not give that to you. You will force the airline to make an emergency landing because the general will not make it. So I went into the doctor's cabin, and Dr. Saab ne mujhe bithaya aur unhone bola that अनफॉर्चुनेटली हम आपके फादर के लिए और कुछ नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि हम जो कुछ कर सकते थे हमने करके देख लिया in terms of chemotherapy, immunotherapy, but the cancer is too aggressive, it's spread too much, and it is just a matter of days. Sangaji, when he looked me in the eye and he spoke these words, मुझे ऐसा लग रहा था कि मेरे पैरों तले से किसी ने मेरे पैरों के नीचे से जमीन निकाल दी है. और मैंने उनको देखा तो आई सेड, आपका कहने का मतलब कि हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते, एंड लिटरली हम अब ये दिन का इंतजार करें कि किसी भी वक्त, किसी भी आवर, किसी भी डे पापा चले जाएंगे, एंड दैट्स ऑल, दैट देयर इज नथिंग एल्स वी कैन डू. और कोविड इतना उस टाइम पीक पे था कि ऐसा लग रहा था कि अगर कैंसर नहीं तो कोविड से ही बंदा खत्म हो जाएगा. और ये बोलकर मैंने उनको कहा that I want to take my father back to the States. And when I said that, he literally stood up. He stood up from the chair and he looked at me as if I am not mentally sane. And he repeated and he laid out the scenario for me. He said, अच्छे लोग breathe नहीं कर पाते जब plane 40,000 फुट की altitude पे fly करता है. आपको क्या लगता है कि जिसके पास lungs ही ना हो, स्टेज 4 का उनका कैंसर है, वो 16 घंटे की फ्लाइट फ्रॉम गुड़गांव टू न्यू जर्सी वो इंड्योर कर पाएंगे? He said, एयरलाइन उनको फ्लाई ही नहीं करेगी बगैर मेरी क्लियरेंस की. मैं वो क्लियरेंस आपको दूंगा नहीं, because you will force the airlines to make an emergency landing, because I can tell you that the general will not make it. And he said it with such conviction. And, I sat listening to this. Hearing those words, tears welled up in my eyes and my heart pounded so fast. I stood up from the chair, folded my hands to do namaskar, and said, thank you, doctor. Where your medical science ends, my guru's divinity begins. Sangaji, these were my exact words. I don't know what got into me. जब उन्होंने ये बोला, मैं भी अपनी कुर्सी से खड़ी हो गई. मैंने उनको हाथ जोड़ के नमस्ते किया और मैंने उनको यही बोला that thank you doctor. जहां आपकी मेडिकल साइंस खत्म होती है, वहां मेरे गुरुजी की ग्रेस और मेरे गुरु की डिविनिटी शुरू होती है. And I left, trying to mask my emotions, knowing I had to face my dad with a poker face. I saw my father looking towards me with eager eyes. He asked, so what is the next course of action? With a gulp, I said, Papa, we will take a break from all the treatment here in India and explore some potential options in the US. The drive home was silent, and my mind raced, trying to process and digest the worst news my ears had ever received. My father meant the world to me because in him I saw my guru, and in my guru I see my father. I had a very, parents are always special, and I have no qualms in admitting very openly that I was much closer and attached to my father. Even I want to say that I love my parents equally, but there was a different bond that I had with him, and I looked at him as my hero and my source of inspiration. And every time I did something in my life, whether it's getting a home, getting promoted at work, it always used to be like, oh, I'm going to make my father proud. And all this unfolding in front of my eyes and losing my father slowly but surely and feeling so helpless, I cannot tell you what the emotions were at that point in time, what that dialogue with the doctor did to me. And then I had to keep a straight face, come out of his room, because right outside the room my dad was waiting, with obviously with a bated breath ke kya bola doctor ne, ab aage kya karna hai. Because I do feel that at that point in time he had not lost the will to live. He wanted to live, and he was a fighter, and he was a trooper, and he fought till his last breath. So बहुत जब उन्होंने मुझसे पूछा कि क्या कहा डॉक्टर ने, मैंने लिटरली जिसे कहते हैं अपने इमोशंस को गल्प करके बिल्कुल स्ट्रेट फेस के साथ उनका हाथ पकड़ के मैंने बोला ऐसे, पापा यहाँ मुझे नहीं लगता उससे कुछ होगा, तो हम अब अमेरिका में जाके एक्सप्लोर करेंगे. और उसके बाद हम वापस घर चले गए, and the drive was silent because my father was a very wise man. He was not a fool, so he understood the unspoken. I had to quickly act, wasting not even a millisecond. The clock was ticking, and with each tick, my father's breaths were on a countdown. I made a couple of phone calls to seek opinions. Second guessing myself, I wondered, am I doing something gravely wrong by wanting to take him back? I wanted to keep fighting. The doctors had given up, but I was not prepared to give up. Was I striving to achieve the impossible? There was only one superpower that could make the impossible possible. The flight had to be booked soon. COVID protocols had to be in place. This time, it was going to be a one-way flight for my father. Many questions plagued my mind. Will he need an oxygen cylinder? How many cylinders will he possibly need on such a long flight? Will the airline even take him? Will he make it? These thoughts and questions pierced through my mind. As a family, we decided to prepone my return, originally scheduled for March 14th to ASAP. And the entire family, my father, mother, sister, her daughter, and me would be flying back to the States. So उस time गुड़गांव में, like I said, that I had flown in with a return ticket कि मैं 10-12 दिन फैमिली के साथ टाइम स्पेंड करके 14 मार्च को वापस आ जाऊंगी. लेकिन जब जाते ही मुझे ये खबर मिली कि वहां कुछ नहीं हो सकता और कोई और होप नहीं बची, तो मुझे लगा कि मुझे अब क्विकली एक्ट करना है, क्योंकि those of you who've experienced cancer will know that I have seen a person wither in a day's time. You have good days and you have bad days, and 1 week can make such a difference that unless you've been through it, it is not possible for you to even relate to and imagine what I'm talking about. But this is what cancer does to you. So ये सुन के मैं आ गई, और अब मेरे को लगा कि अब मेरे को अकेले तो नहीं जाना, मैं अपनी सारी फैमिली को लेकर जाऊंगी, और 14 मार्च से जितनी जल्दी मैं इसको प्रीपोन कर सकूं मुझे वो करना है. लेकिन उससे पहले कई चीजें सोचनी है, आप कैसे किसी का पूरा लाइफ टाइम को सूटकेसेस में रैप करके, पैक करके 2 4 5 दिन में सब कुछ वाइंड अप करके अपने घर से निकलो, बिकॉज आपका दिल आपको ये बता रहा है कि ये पापा की लास्ट फ्लाइट टू यूएस है, वन वे फ्लाइट टू यूएस है, पापा इज नॉट गोना मेक इट बैक। और कोविड के इतने स्ट्रिक्ट प्रोटोकॉल्स थे, ऑक्सीजन की इतनी शॉर्टेज थी कि मेरे को समझ ही नहीं आ रहा था कि डॉक्टर साहब ने जो बोला कि 16 घंटे की वो फ्लाइट, ऑक्सीजन के बगैर वो गुजारा नहीं होगा, इमरजेंसी लैंडिंग करवानी पड़ जाएगी, ये सारे डाउट्स मुझे अंदर ही अंदर से खाए जा रहे थे। और मैं अपने आप को सेकंड गेस मैंने करना शुरू कर दिया था कि क्या मेरी फीलिंग ये सही है कि मैं अपने फादर को लेकर जाना चाहती हूँ, लेकिन मेरा दिल नहीं मान रहा था कि मैं यहाँ उनको छोड़ के चले जाऊं, knowing that he's not going to make it. So anyway, ये सारे सवाल मेरे जहन में उठने शुरू हो गए। My dad, who was tired of fighting this terminal disease with all his might, asked me, "How will I endure this flight? I can barely even walk on my own." I held his hand and reassured him that we would fight this like true army soldiers. We were on a battlefield with time and cancer as our enemies, but we would overcome this together. He smiled, reminiscing about Guru Maharaj. My father always had his Swarup by him. A date was decided, March 9, 2021. Now, how does one pack up their entire life, wrap up, and be ready to leave in just 4 days? Booking tickets was the easiest part. But what about everything else that came with this decision? So when we decided, okay, yes, I'm going to bring my father back, I remember having this conversation. He held my hand and he said, "ये मैं कैसे करूँगा?" ये उनके words थे. He said, "मुझसे आरती, मुझसे तो अब खुद से चला भी नहीं जाता. मैं ये flight कैसे करूँगा?" And मैंने अपने फादर का हाथ पकड़ा उस टाइम and I said, "पापा, आप तो आर्मी जनरल हो, आप ये सोचो कि आप मैदान जंग में खड़े हो और हमारी जंग है ये कैंसर के साथ और समय के साथ, और हमें लड़ना है। और इस टाइम पे हम अपनी होप नहीं खो सकते, because we are going to take our chance." And a date was decided. And deciding the date and booking the tickets was the easiest thing, but everything else that came with that decision was like, एक पहाड़ जैसा लग रहा था कि इस पहाड़ को कैसे कैसे चढ़ा जाए। The house that my parents had lived in for years had to be packed, and the walls that adorned beautiful memories had to be stripped. It was a lot to pack, but even that wasn't the real challenge. The real dilemma was finding an answer. Was this the right move, or was I, in fact, putting my dad's life in danger? I felt the same PTSD I felt when I was moving out of my marital home. On March 7, 2021, we decided to have an intimate satsang at home. It was the 4 of us as a family gathering together after almost 2 decades, and we invited a few other Sangat members to join us as well. So like I said कि जब मैं October 2020 में गई थी तो उस टाइम तो खैर मेरी niece भी वहाँ नहीं थी. When I went back in March, my niece was there, and we decided कि 9th March को वापस स्टेट्स जाएंगे, और उससे पहले एक छोटा सा सत्संग कर लेते हैं, इंटीमेट सत्संग. और कुछ और संगत के लोगों को गुड़गांव में हमने बोला कि सत्संग हम घर में कर रहे हैं. पहले मेरा इनिशियल प्लान ये था, आई स्टिल रिमेम्बर कि 2021 में आई थिंक शिवरात्रि 11 मार्च की थी, तो मुझे था हम 11 मार्च को एक अच्छा बड़ा सत्संग करेंगे. लेकिन क्योंकि आई वाज सपोज्ड टू बी देयर टिल द 14th of March, बट क्योंकि अब वो टिकट्स प्रीपोन कर ली, तो अब 11 की जगह हमने 7 को ही कहा कि 7 को एक छोटा सा सत्संग कर लेते हैं. और अंदर ही अंदर मेरे को ये सवाल उठ रहा था, because obviously I got a mixed reaction. Some people said yes, this is good, beta, you're very brave. अगर आप पापा को ले जा सकते हो तो ले जाओ, क्योंकि यहाँ पर अब कुछ भी नहीं है. और and like I said कि अगर कैंसर नहीं तो कोविड तो पहुंच ही जाएगा घर तक. और कईयों ने मेरे को बोला that I was being, selfish. I was a little selfish in my thinking that how can I think of uprooting somebody in this state, and literally disrupting their life and uprooting their life during the final stages, and it's a bad decision because you'll end up killing him. तो मेरे ऊपर बहुत बहुत भारी बोझ था. और जैसे I felt कि मैं उन्हीं क्रॉस रोड्स में हूँ जैसे मैं 2019 2020 के टाइम फ्रेम में थी, when I was constantly asking Guruji that am I taking the right step, should I leave my house, what should I do, you have to answer me. So everyone we invited came and we all sat down to meditate. Tears flowed non-stop, not just from us but from everyone in the room. By then, most people knew about our plans to take Dad away from Gurugram. During the meditation, an auntie named Anju Auntie was praying to Guruji, seeking a sign or permission to validate if taking Dad with us was the right decision. No one knew what was going on in her mind, but she was looking for some presence or validation to confirm her doubts. So, like I said, a handful of people were invited. All of them showed up, and that was a very emotional, a very heavy satsang. और हम सब बैठे तो थे ध्यान में, लेकिन रूम में किसी के भी आंसू रुक नहीं रहे थे, because my father was loved very very fondly by everybody. And most people knew कि जनरल कपूर अब गुरुग्राम से जा रहे हैं, and most people also knew कि अब गुड़गांव में वो वापस नहीं आएंगे. तो एक आंटी अपने ही अंतर मन ही मन में गुरुजी से प्रे कर रही थी कि गुरुजी आप मुझे कोई अपनी प्रेजेंस दिखाओ, ये वैलिडेट करने के लिए कि जो उनकी छोटी बेटी ये डिसीजन ले रही है वो सही है कि नहीं है. After the satsang, another auntie named Neelam Dugal, जिनका मैंने कल भी या परसों जिक्र किया था. Wow, actually as a matter of fact, मैं पिछले 3 दिन से हैट्रिक हो गई, लगातार चैप्टर्स पढ़ने को मिल रहे हैं, तो ये भी गुरुजी की कोई कृपा होगी. नीलम आंटी was the one जिन्होंने सबसे पहले 2020 में पापा की मेडिकल रिपोर्ट्स भेजी थी. तो the same auntie, she randomly, after the satsang was over, started to share how she felt Guruji's presence. That's when Anju Auntie spoke up, revealing that she was seeking confirmation during the satsang, and she felt that this was an assurance from Guruji that taking Dad to the US had been blessed. Dad couldn't sit through the satsang, but he did join us for Aarti, ate a little prasad, and then went back to lay down. With only a couple of days left to the D-Day, there was scarcity of oxygen cylinders. However, we managed to get one that would last for 2 to 3 hours. We all were scared, knowing that if required, this would be insufficient, but we had no other choice. Over the weekend, something crossed my mind, and I asked my family to check their passports for visa validity and expiration dates. So I'll explain this previous paragraph a little bit, that satsang ke dauran ek auntie was looking for a sign. How another auntie, she randomly got up, she shared her satsang, and she says, look, here Guruji is making his presence felt. And then the other auntie spoke up that this is what I was looking to hear, and we took it as a confirmation that Guruji had blessed this, and Guruji is going to make it happen. But फिर भी the practical side of us nudges us, और मेरे को ये लग रहा था कि ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर अगर मेरे को चाहिए हो तो on a 16-hour flight I would typically need to take about 8 oxygen cylinders. हमें बड़ी मुश्किल से एक ही मिला था, और हमें पता था कि वो 2 या 3 घंटे से ज्यादा नहीं चलेगा. और मन में फिर वही था कि अगर जरूरत पड़ गई तो ये ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर काफी नहीं होएगा, पर और चॉइस ही नहीं थी हमारे पास. और आई थिंक 9th March 2021 was Tuesday, और आई थिंक फ्राइडे शाम की बात है कि मैंने डाइनिंग टेबल पे ऐसे ही कैजुअली अपनी फैमिली से पूछ लिया कि एक बार सारे अपने पासपोर्ट्स खोल के चेक कर लो कि सबका पासपोर्ट वैलिड तो है और उसमें वैलिड वीजा तो लगा हुआ है. So everyone had valid passports and active US visas except my niece, Tamanna, whose passport had expired. Imagine discovering this over the weekend when we were slated to fly out on Tuesday evening. All hell broke loose and my niece was panic stricken. That evening, we were supposed to go to Bade Mandir and she prayed feverishly to Gurupa to make the impossible possible. She needed her passport renewed in a day with only Monday and Tuesday available, and the flight was Tuesday night. So imagine Friday ko we stumble upon this discovery कि तमन्ना का तो passport ही expire हो चुका है. और जब ये देखा तो उसने रोना धोना शुरू कर दिया because she's like मैंने भी मम्मा और नानू के साथ जाना है, मुझे जाना है और मुझे नहीं पता कि ट्यूसडे शाम की फ्लाइट है, वीकेंड पे एम्बेसी बंद है, तो खाली सिर्फ मंडे का दिन बचा. एंड माय जीजा जी इज इन पुणे. तो पूजा वाज इन दिल्ली, तमन्ना वाज इन दिल्ली एंड माइनर का पासपोर्ट रिन्यू करने के लिए दोनों पेरेंट्स की जरूरत होती है. So it was like too many logistics had to fall into place within a day. और उसी शाम को हमें बड़े मंदिर जाना था और तमन्ना ने तो हर जगह बड़े मंदिर के हर कोने में गुरुजी को हाथ जोड़ रही है, गुरुजी प्लीज मुझे जाना है, आप कुछ भी करो. Being a minor, she required both parents and her dad, my brother-in-law, Tarun, was not in Gurgaon, he was in Pune. However, he agreed to take the first flight on Monday AM into Gurgaon from Pune. Both parents rushed into the embassy for emergency passport issuance. Someone from Gurgaon Sangat, un uncle ka naam Anil Malhotra hai, he helped pull a few strings and by Tuesday afternoon, my niece had her passport ready. Again, this is nothing short of a miracle, how things fell into place. मंडे मॉर्निंग को वो पुणे से गुड़गांव आते हैं, एम्बेसी में इमरजेंसी अपॉइंटमेंट मिलती है और एक दिन में पासपोर्ट रिन्यू होकर आ जाता है. Until the 11th hour, we did not know if she would be able to accompany us or if she'd need to go back to Pune with her dad. She was ecstatic to learn that she could join us on travels back to the US. So because ये इतना last minute तक uncertainty थी, literally हमने बैग से तमन्ना का सामान निकाल दिया था कि जब तक पासपोर्ट हाथ में नहीं आता, जो ट्यूसडे आफ्टरनून तक नहीं आया था, हमें पता ही नहीं था कि whether we'll have to send her back to Pune or she'll be able to accompany us. Ultimately, Tuesday afternoon को जब हाथ में passport आया and it was confirmed that she can join us for travels back to US, she was on cloud 9. On Tuesday evening, March 9, 2021, we had a lot of Sangat who had come to see us off. Our close friends, Anand and Gurgaon, they drove us to the airport. With heavy hearts, we embarked on our journey with 16 bags amongst the 5 of us. The support pouring in from all quarters was unforgettable. The Sangat, Bade Mandir se, मतलब जो support मिली और कैसे, like I said, कि 4 दिन के अंदर Sangat ji, I wrapped up as much as I could. Stripped down the home, removed beautiful pictures, गुरुजी के खूबसूरत स्वरूप, जो हम जितना पैक कर सकते थे, 16 बैग हमने बनाए amongst the 5 of us, and we went to the airport. Given the number of passengers and the bags that needed to be transported to the airport, we had 2 large cars. In addition to the bags, we had 2 massive swarups, framed pictures of Guruji that had to be packed in wooden cartons and transported as well. जो पिक्चर आप पीछे भी देख रहे हैं संगत जी, ये पिंक स्वरूप वाली, ये फ्रेम में छोटी लग रही है लेकिन असल में इट्स अ वेरी वेरी बिग स्वरूप. तो इसको, ये सूटकेस में तो पैक हो नहीं सकता, तो इसको अलग से ये और एक और येलो चोले वाला गुरुजी का स्वरूप अलग से 2 वुडन कार्टन्स में पैक कराया. The van with bags and the large swarups led the entourage and all passengers followed that cargo van, which led us to the airport. So passengers के लिए 2 गाड़ियां थी और सामान के लिए एक बड़ी वैन थी जिसमें गुरुजी की ये बड़े स्वरूप, 16 बैग, आगे it's leading the entourage और हम पीछे airport पहुंच गए. I was feeling nervous as only ticketed passengers were allowed to enter the airport in India. So our friends stood outside while the five of us and three porters went in to help with the check-in. I had a firm gaze on my dad and my heart was beating very fast. Would the airline refuse to take him, as the doctor said? I took everyone's passports and we did check-ins, one person at a time. Surprisingly, no issues were created, and all the suitcases were tagged with no fuss about the weight or even the sheer number of bags. I don't know how to explain this, but koi fuss nahi. Pure 16 ke 16 bags were checked in. And there was no question about not taking dad also. They didn't ask me for any letter, any special approval, क्योंकि अगर वो मांगते तो मेरे पास तो थी भी नहीं. The only problem arose with the two large wooden cartons containing the large picture frame of Guruji Maharaj. Those cartons were so large that they couldn't go through the X-ray belt at the airport. Despite trying to open the cartons, they were still too wide to pass through the X-ray machine. We had no choice but to send them back, hoping to bring them on a ship or find an alternative form of transportation. Maybe even airlift them. So bags to sare check-in ho gaye. The problem came with the wooden carton, क्योंकि वो wooden carton was so wide कि वो किसी भी X-ray machine से के through pass नहीं हो रहा था. And जब तक वो X-ray machine के through pass नहीं होएगा, तो it cannot be loaded on the plane. हमने कार्टन को खोलने की कोशिश करी एयरपोर्ट पे, पर nothing worked. और फाइनली ये डिसाइड किया कि इन स्वरूप्स को वापस भेजते हैं, and we will try another way जिसके थ्रू ये डायरेक्टली न्यू जर्सी पहुंच जाएंगे. और मुझे ये लगता है कि ये स्वरूप आगे आगे लिटरली हमारा चेक इन कराने गए थे. It seemed as if those Swarups were with us, ensuring that the check-in process happened seamlessly. And indeed, the airline did not deny flying my father. They did not ask for any clearance, as the doctor had predicted. It was a relief since we had no medical clearance to begin with, and we would have been stuck right there if they would have asked for it. The timing was so perfect that we didn't even have to wait in a lounge. We went straight to the airplane. My dad, with his firm handshake, greeted the air hostess, and soon enough, we were all seated and ready to go. So the timing of everything, by the time we completed the check-in, it was almost time to board. So ऐसा भी नहीं था कि पापा को, ज़्यादा लंबी wait करनी पड़ी. And सीधे हम, we were escorted. I still remember my dad shook hands with the air hostess, और मेरे को और मेरी बहन को ये छोटी छोटी चीजों की बड़ी फिक्र थी कि my dad was a tall man. He was 6 feet tall, well built. और मुझे ये लग रहा था कि if he's uncomfortable, if he needs to go to the restroom, we don't even have the physical stamina to give him that comfort. Little things were sort of plaguing my mind. The first worry was behind us, and now the job started to ensure that the next 15 hours would be uneventful. Would he need oxygen? How would he manage going to the restroom? Will he make it? Will he keep breathing? All those thoughts engulfed my mind once again, and without really speaking them aloud, I knew my sister and mother were in the same mental space. I connected my phone to the airline Wi-Fi and stayed in touch with the Sangat. Jap was happening not only in Gurgaon, but also in the US. Everyone was doing Ardas prayers for a safe landing. Time seemed to pass so slowly. Dad was in his seat with his eyes closed for most of the journey. We took turns to check if he was still breathing. 14 hours later, the touchdown happened, and tears automatically streamed down my cheeks. He had made it without even needing to touch the one oxygen cylinder that we had. There was no emergency landing. We had arrived safely in New Jersey. I still remember, Sangaji, when the flight touched down, it felt real. It was unbelievable कि oxygen cylinder की जरूरत नहीं पड़ी. एक बार भी पापा restroom नहीं गए. He kept breathing on his own. And it is all, I think, the powers of ardas and prayers that were happening all around New Jersey, mein, Gurgaon, mein, all over the world. Literally throughout the night, there was job happening as we were flying. As we unbuckled ourselves, we got a strong whiff of Guruji's fragrance, which seemed to surround us even through our double mass. We all said together, Guruji's here. Back in the days, mask लगा के आपको travel करना पड़ता था और पापा की condition के कारण हमने एक नहीं दो mask लगाए हुए थे कि हम किसी से कुछ transit में contract ना कर दें और लेने के देने पड़ जाएं because पापा की हालत was rather delicate. So through those double masks, जैसे ही हम land करे इतनी strong गुरुजी की fragrance आई, हमने एक दूसरे को देखा और हमने सीधे ये बोला कि गुरुजी साथ है. Some fellow passengers had noticed the love and concern the entire family was exuding towards Dad. They told my mother that it was beautiful to silently witness the care we showed him throughout the journey. We deplaned and walked towards immigration. Dad looked feeble, but he was such a trooper. As we waited in line to see the immigration officer, he asked for fingerprints and a retina scan of all the passengers entering the US. We all took turns completing all formalities. When it was Dad's turn, it was as if the officer did not even see him. He skipped the retina scan and fingerprinting, and we went through the process smoothly without any hiccups. It was incredible and couldn't be explained, but it happened. Soon we collected our bags, and Dad sat with me in the front seat of the car. I drove him home from the airport. With Shabads playing in the car, I couldn't believe this was happening, but it was. संगत जी मुझे यकीन नहीं आ रहा था even जब हम पहुंचे, everybody went through those formalities. लेकिन जब पापा की बारी आई, तो कोई formalities नहीं, जैसे officer के लिए Dad invisible थे. And we went, he went out like it was a breeze. हमने अपने bags collect किए, and I was driving my father home. He was sitting next to me on the front seat. और मुझे यकीन ही नहीं हो रहा था कि ये जो जिद मैंने गुरुजी के आगे कर रखी थी कि गुरुजी एक बार मेरे पेरेंट्स मेरे नए घर में आ जाए, एक बार मेरे फादर आ जाए, इस घर को ब्लेस कर दें. Amidst, everything else that was happening, his cancer, stage 4, health deteriorating, COVID spreading like wildfire, Guruji made it possible. And I don't know how, because there is no logic that can explain. क्योंकि डॉक्टर्स ने तो पहले ही मना कर दिया था कि ये हो ही नहीं सकता, ये नामुमकिन है. A big van was rented to transport all the bags, and the whole family sat with me. We all arrived home, and Victor was there to help us get oriented and situated again. My father looked so drained and disoriented. It was March 10th in the US, and March 11th was Shivratri. As soon as we reached home, Dad was made comfortable on the bed. Despite the jet lag and the unpacking to do, there was a burning desire to have a small satsang at home on Mahashivratri. Coincidentally, at a time which did not clash with the temple celebrations in New Jersey. Now, like I had said, that I wanted to do Shivratri ka satsang, but that I'd planned in Gurgaon. But because we preponed the dates, मन में वो desire तो था कि अब US में सब इकट्ठे हैं, तो शिवरात्रि का छोटा सा सत्संग कर लेते हैं घर पे. There was much to do, and most importantly, an ailing patient, as the clock had not stopped ticking. We had to get him medical help in a foreign land pronto. It was heartwarming to see the support that poured in as soon as news of Dad's arrival spread. Getting through the 10th was extremely tough, but on the 11th, the satsang happened. And it turned out even better than we could have planned for. The Shivratri satsang was truly magical, with every little detail catered to. We had bear, we had special damru cupcakes, mehendi cones, and the most magical part was when Dad received the Akhand Prasad from a Sangat in New Jersey. That auntie's name is Neeta Auntie. The Amrit Varsha from the Shiv Murti at her home, oozing honey, reached Dad on the day of the Shivratri satsang itself. That was also the day when Dad was able to come down to the basement and pay obeisance at Guruji's lotus feet in his darbar. The videos from that night have been added to the treasure chest, cherishing those precious moments. Shivratri satsang was over, and soon it was day 2, March 12th. The focus now shifted to finding medical treatment for our father. We knew we had to take every single chance to fight and combat this disease. So like I said, हम पहुंच गए और मन में वो डिजायर थी कि सत्संग होए, लेकिन आप इंटरनेशनल ट्रैवल के बाद थके आते हो, less than 24 hours में शिवरात्रि है, सत्संग होना है, पर कैसे जब गुरुजी, I do believe कि सत्संग कराने वाले तो गुरुजी ही हैं. हमें ये लगता है कि हम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हम कुछ नहीं, हम तो बहुत तुच्छ हैं. हम सोचते कुछ और है, होता कुछ और है. एंड इतनी ब्यूटिफुली शिवरात्रि का सत्संग हुआ, विद एवरीथिंग दैट आई हैड इमेजिन्ड कि बेर होना चाहिए, गुरुजी को एगलेस डमरू के शेप के कपकेक्स खिलाएंगे, मेहंदी होनी चाहिए, और वो सब जो सोचा था वो हुआ. एंड सत्संग के बाद फिर ऑब्वियसली ये लगने लगा कि अब our immediate priority and focus should be getting medical attention for my father. Now, people who live in America will understand the importance of having health insurance, क्योंकि यहाँ health insurance के बगैर कुछ भी नहीं है, संगत जी. And getting health insurance with a pre-existing disease is not possible. So I'm going to read chapter 14, which is Blessings Galore. And before that, I want to show you this picture, which is my absolute favorite. It's Guruji and Papa, and this is from my sister's reception. Jab Guruji aaye the. Blessings Galore. That day began with an early morning phone call from a Sangat member in Australia. Her name is Sakhi. I think she's on the call right now. Her enthusiastic voice on the line urged me to listen to the satsang happening on Zoom at that moment. In her excitement, she asked for the exact date of our departure from India. I responded it was March 9th, and she proceeded to share what was said during the satsang. In the satsang, a lady related to Colonel Joshi was sharing her experience. She said that on March 9th, she had a dream where Guruji told her that he had to leave India and go to America for some urgent work. In her dream, she questioned Guruji, saying, "Okay, if you are leaving, Guruji, why don't you also visit my son?" Guruji replied, "Your son is in Canada, but I have to go to America for a very specific cause." Upon hearing this, the Sangat member from Australia called me with excitement, confirming that it was Guruji himself who flew with Dad. So I remember 12 March ko, swere, I get a message from Sakhi, who I think should be on the line right now. And she said, दीदी आप इंडिया से कौन सी तारीख को निकले थे? तो मैंने उसको डेट बताई. शी सर, आपको पता है कि जनरल कपूर के साथ गुरुजी आए हैं, गुरुजी उनको लेकर आए हैं, क्योंकि मैं अभी ये सत्संग सुन रही थी जो जूम प्लेटफॉर्म में हो रहा था. कर्नल जोशी की वो रिलेटिव, मुझे एग्जैक्ट रिलेशनशिप नहीं पता, उन्होंने बताया कि ऐसे ऐसे उनको सपना आया कि उसी डेट जब हम निकल रहे थे, गुरुजी को अचानक इंडिया छोड़ के अमेरिका जाना पड़ रहा है, और गुरुजी ने ये कॉन्फर्मेशन दे दी ना. कोविड का एक और हाईलाइट ये था, संगत जी, which kept us all going, and like I said that it kept me sane, was कि बहुत सत्संग शुरू हो गए थे जूम वगैरह पे. तो ओल्ड संगत के साथ कनेक्ट करना, वही पुरानी बातें याद करना, made it easier to tide through those challenging times. And ये सारी कम्युनिटी जो बनी है, ये कोविड की ही देन है, क्योंकि गुरुजी की चोला छोड़ने के बाद वी हैड लॉस्ट टच विद अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल. कभी इतने सत्संग सुनने को नहीं मिलते थे, क्योंकि जो सत्संग का इनिशियल कॉन्सेप्ट वाज ऑलवेज इन पर्सन. तो जब 2020 में ये जूम वगैरह शुरू हुआ, तो शुरू शुरू में हमें बड़ा ऑड लगता था कि हम फोन को देखकर सत्संग सुनाएंगे, ऐसे तो पहले कभी भी नहीं हुआ. लेकिन देयर वाज अ रीजन व्हाई दिस वाज ऑल अनफोल्डिंग. So when she shared this with me, the light bulb in my head turned on. Of course, it had to be Guruji, holding him throughout the long, arduous journey. Every time I went for darshan and requested Guruji to come to America, he would always say, "Avanga, avanga, America, General Kapur naal avanga." मुझे याद है कि जब भी मैं अमेरिका से वापस गुरुजी के पास जाती थी, मैं गुरुजी को कहती थी, गुरुजी आप अमेरिका आना, और उनका यही जवाब होता था. और उन्होंने हमेशा बोलना कि हाँ आवागा आवागा, जनरल कपूर नाल आवागा. लेकिन जब गुरुजी ने ये चोला अपना छोड़ा 2007 में, तो वो बात निकल गई मन से. लेकिन जब साक्षी ने मेरे को ये दोबारा सत्संग सुनाया, और आप ये सोचो, व्हाट्स द लाइकलीहुड, साक्षी बैठी है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में, मैं हूं अमेरिका में, सत्संग हो रहा है पता नहीं किस कोने में, जूम में. And the fact that she hears it, she tells me, I'm able to relate to it. It's not a coincidence. And Guruji would always say, Avanga, Avanga, General Kapur naal Avanga. This statement had been forgotten after Guruji left his physical form. In fact, he had told my parents to go to America even when I was not settled there yet. मुझे याद है कि क्योंकि शादी के बाद मैं इनिशियली अफ्रीका गई थी, और जब मेरी प्रेगनेंसी की न्यूज मैंने अपने पेरेंट्स के साथ शेयर करी, तो गुरुजी ने मेरे पेरेंट्स को बोला कि अब अमेरिका जाना है, अमेरिका घुमाओ. इट्स अ वेरी क्यूट सत्संग कि एक बार मेरी मम्मी गुरुजी को मत्था टेक रही थी, एंड रैंडमली ही टेल्स माय मॉम कि आंटी तू ना अमेरिका घुमा. एंड मम्मा को ये समझ नहीं आया कि क्या गुरुजी बोल रहे हैं. तो माय डैड सेड कि जब बाहर निकल रहे थे, माय डैड सेड कि गुरुजी ने, ही यूज्ड टू कॉल माय मदर प्यारी. ही सेड, प्यारी, गुरुजी ने तेरी सैर करने की जगह तो बड़ी फर्स्ट क्लास चुनी है, बट अमेरिका में तो कोई भी नहीं है. एंड प्यारी, तेरा तो पासपोर्ट और वीजा भी नहीं है, क्योंकि जब while you're in service, तो मेरे डैड के पास डिप्लोमेटिक पासपोर्ट था, और रिटायर होने के बाद यू सरेंडर दैट टू द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. तो उन्होंने उसके बाद दोबारा पासपोर्ट भी नहीं बनाया था. तो ऐसे ही बातचीत करते हुए चले गए. द नेक्स्ट डे माय फादर फॉलोड अप विद गुरुजी कि गुरुजी आपने कल शील को बोला कि अमेरिका घुमाओ. एंड ही वांटेड टू करेक्ट गुरुजी कि गुरुजी को कोई गलतफहमी शायद हुई है. ही सेड, गुरुजी वो मेरी जो छोटी बेटी है ना, आरती वो है घाना में, अफ्रीका फुल पंजाबी लहजे में, कि वो अफ्रीका घाना में है. एंड गुरुजी ने बड़े प्यार से रिपीट किया. ही सेड, अच्छा ਤੁਹਾਡੀ छोटी लड़की आरती काना च है, अफ्रीका, तो कोई गल नहीं जनरल साहब, तुसी भी अमेरिका घुमाओ. And he predicted this even before we had moved. So what I'm trying to say is कि गुरुजी की मुखमंडल से निकली हुई कोई भी बात खाली नहीं जाती. And then he said, चलो जनरल साहब, चलो अमेरिका, उत्थों ही आगे चलना है. So these words उस टाइम पे कितने प्रोफाउंड, एक एक वर्ड्स, उत्थों ही आगे चलना है. किसको पता था आज से 20 साल पहले या 15 साल पहले, या जब की भी ये बात है. आई वांट टू से 2005, हाँ 2005 की ये बात है कि गुरुजी ने ये कहना कि चलो जनरल साहब, चलो अमेरिका, उत्थों ही आगे चलना है. When my parents heard this, they tried to tell Guruji that I was in Africa, not America. They also told Guruji that they don't even have current passports. Guruji insisted that they get their passports reissued. My dad had not renewed his passport since he had surrendered his diplomatic passport back to the government of India after his retirement. This interaction was not a coincidence, but a reinforcement from Guruji. In moments of despair, tuning into him and his teachings provides a unique way to find answers. His guidance and presence continue to be a guiding force in our lives, even beyond the physical realm. During the time my dad was here, Guruji connected us very closely to our neighbor, who was also a member of the Sangat, though we didn't have a close relationship before. It was during my dad's stay that Guruji brought her into our lives more than ever. It was no coincidence. She was Dr. Kusum Punjabi, who was heading up the emergency room at Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, which was conveniently close to our home. It was evident that Maharaj was paving the path for Dad, ensuring he had the medical attention he needed. Dr. Kusum was God sent and took care of my father like a daughter would. Additionally, Victor stepped in like a son, tirelessly taking care of my father without having to be asked. With a smile on his face, he devotedly attended to my father, who had become like an infant. Imagine bringing somebody in that condition to a foreign country where you have no insurance for that person. Um, things start to happen. My neighbor, connected with me. मैं एक बार walk पे थी and I ran into her, and we started talking. She's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea you moved in here. I live here. I'm right across the street." And I think Guruji was sort of creating those bonds because I knew, I mean, he knew that I'm going to really need, these people in my life to take care of my dad. And so when she found out that Dad is here, she would come home, check in on him, and it was unreal. Somebody just taking care of my father as if as a daughter would. The support from the Sangat poured in here as well, just as it did in Gurgaon. Everyone wanted to visit him, but due to his delicate health and presence of COVID, not everyone could. So a lot of people wanted to, जैसे उनको पता चला कि पापा यहाँ पर हैं, they wanted to come, but COVID था, तो उस time इतना रिवाज नहीं था that people would come home as freely as they're doing again today, and especially cancer के time तो और भी restriction हो जाती है. Vikram and other close friends came to visit. An auntie from Sangat, Seema auntie, helped us get the right type of bed for Dad to ensure his comfort. All the resources were coming in, and we had a dedicated aide for his care thanks to the guidance we received. It was truly remarkable to witness all this support and assistance, especially without an official green card, which is usually unheard of. The timing of how everything came together so quickly was nothing short of fascinating. Within days, my dad got a special bed because, a regular bed was no good. बिल्कुल इन्फेंट की तरह हो गए थे पापा. उनको बेड पे सपोर्ट, बेड को ऊपर करना, नीचे करना, getting a dedicated aid through Robert Wood Johnson. कुसुम ने हमें गाइडेंस दी कि ऐसे ऐसे पॉसिबल है. Without, his green card was in progress. The only step remaining was that interview, which could never happen, or up to impossible ho gaya tha because of his condition and COVID. So officially green card bhi nahi tha, and all these resources, I don't know how Sangaji started getting approved, and we started getting all this at home. जिससे ऐसे लग रहा था कि पापा की केयर के लिए गुरुजी ने सब कुछ ऊपर नीचे कर दिया. On one particular day, Kusum decided to take Dad in to ensure his vitals were fine and, if necessary, administer the required fluids. She had arranged for a wheelchair and staff to be waiting for Dad at the curbside of the hospital. Despite the lobby being filled with patients, she reserved a private room for him. It was challenging. It was a challenging time given the ongoing pandemic. During this visit, I saw my dad talking normally, and he even looked a bit cheerful. He expressed his love to me and said, Guruji ka kaam aur Guruji ka naam badhate rehna. Continue to spread Guruji's name, glory, love, and light. Even in the midst of his sickness, all he could think of was his Guru and praising Guruji's glory. So, एक बार, Kusum had come for a routine checkup at home, and she said, "Uncle, काफी dehydrated से लग रहे हैं. तो कल मैं उनको हॉस्पिटल मंगवा लेती हूँ एंड आई विल चेक हिज वाइटल्स, और उनको अगर थोड़ा फ्लूइड्स वगैरह भी देने की जरूरत पड़ी तो वो हम कर देंगे, सो दैट ही रीगेन्स सम स्ट्रेंथ. And she did that, and I cannot forget कि जब हम हॉस्पिटल पहुंचे पापा को लेकर, तो लिटरली कर्ब साइड पे व्हील चेयर स्टाफ नर्सेस वेट कर रहे थे कि पापा आएंगे और उनको हम व्हील इन करके अंदर लेकर जाएंगे. और संगत जी, उस टाइम यूएस में लॉबीज हॉस्पिटल की भरी होती थी विद कोविड पेशेंट्स, and she had kept a private room for dad जहां पर she injected some fluids through IV कि जिससे थोड़ा energy level, थोड़े vital stats थोड़े better हो. And जैसे ही वो हुआ, I remember कि उस दिन पापा hospital में he was very chatty. He started telling people and the nurses and the staff here about Guruji. और मुझे भी वो देखकर उन्होंने एक ही बात बोली कि बेटा गुरुजी का नाम और काम तू बढ़ाते रहना. और मैं यही सोच रही थी, ऐसे देखो क्या क्या प्रेम है गुरु और शिष्य के बीच में, कि गुरु अपने शिष्य के लिए ही इज मेकिंग द इम्पॉसिबल पॉसिबल, एंड शिष्य लिटरली अपनी लास्ट लेग में भी ऑल ही कुड थिंक ऑफ वाज ऑफ गुरुजी. एंड यहाँ पर गोरे लोगों को वो गुरुजी के बारे में बता रहे हैं. Dad was quickly put in contact with the local oncologist at the Cancer Institute of New Jersey, CINJ, and securing an appointment so swiftly was undoubtedly Guruji's grace. Despite the extensive progression of cancer, the doctor decided to take on Dad's case. The overnight copying of CDs with his reports so that we could share them on time felt like a true miracle. And there were countless other instances of Guruji's grace that I possibly cannot begin to recount and list here. The doctor decided to order blood work for Dad at home to explore the possibility of finding a gene marker match that could help identify the next course of treatment, if any. So, like I said, hospital se support milne lag gayi, appointment mil gayi at Cancer Institute of New Jersey. The doctor decided to take Dad's case, and she asked for reports, prior medical reports, or kaise overnight wo CD pe copy karke we sent it via email. Like everything was happening at a breakneck speed. और डॉक्टर ने कहा कि चलो अगर मेरे को ये केस लेना है तो मैं दोबारा ब्लड वर्क ऑर्डर करूंगी, और मैं टेक्नीशियन को घर भेजती हूँ टू ड्रॉ द ब्लड. The next day, a technician came home to draw blood. Upon entering Dad's room, she heard the mantra jap playing and immediately found it soothing, despite not understanding its meaning. She made her first attempt to prick Dad's vein, but due to his thin and shriveled veins, they collapsed and she couldn't get any blood. Nervously, she said she couldn't continue as it might cause discomfort and was against the law. The test required 2 full test tubes of blood, and after failing twice, we were disheartened, knowing how desperate we were to conduct this test to hopefully find a match, which hadn't happened in India. Seeing our dejected faces and understanding our hope for the test, she decided to give it one more try. On the third attempt, at her own risk, she pricked Dad's vein, and miraculously, blood began to ooze out. She filled the first test tube and managed to get the second test tube half full. There was a jubilant smile on our faces as she wrapped up, and she said she had collected just enough to run the tests. The results would be known in the next 2 days, she informed us before leaving. So tech घर पे आई तो सबसे पहले she made a comment about the mantra jap. गोरी थी, उसको mantra jap obviously समझ नहीं आ रहा था, but she said this is very soothing. Then she started to prick Dad's veins because 2 test tube blood की चाहिए थी to find कि कोई gene marker match मिलेगा कि नहीं मिलेगा, क्योंकि इंडिया में वो gene marker match मिला नहीं था, otherwise the treatment would have been easier. So because पापा की veins काफी shrivel हो चुकी थी, तो बार-बार prick करना was not an option. Plus बहुत पापा weak थे, blood निकल नहीं रहा था. And she said legally by law मैं 2 बार से ज्यादा prick नहीं कर सकती. तो दोनों बार जब उसने prick किया और blood नहीं निकला because veins बिल्कुल सूख चुकी थी, तो हमारे फेस पे बहुत डिसअपॉइंटमेंट थी कि अब ये टेस्ट हो ही नहीं सकता, तो फिर ये हो भी चले गई. She looked at our faces and without asking, she tried the third time. And third time में उसको जितना blood चाहिए था, उसकी test tubes भर गई. And she said, I'm going to run the tests और 2 दिन में आपको reports मिल जानी चाहिए. Being a caregiver to a cancer patient is an emotional roller coaster, and only those who have experienced it can truly understand the volatility of the swings. Some days are good while others are not so good, and the situation could vary by the day or even fluctuate by the hour. A couple of days later, we received a phone call from the doctor, and to our disbelief, a match for a new medication was found. Although it was late in the treatment process, the doctor believed that it was still worth a try. This medication was relatively new, still under clinical trial, but we were determined to give it a shot. Filled with immense gratitude, we contacted the manufacturer. They agreed to courier the medication to us overnight. The next day, we had it in our hands, the pills that could potentially grant my dad more time. So Sangaji, आप imagine करो, our joy knew no bounds. Not only कि वो test हुआ, test के through gene marker का match मिला. She said एक नई दवाई है, वो दवाई अभी तक clinical trial में है, but we can give it a shot. आप manufacturer को phone करो और इन pills को overnight आप courier कराओ. And we did that. और अगले दिन हमारे हाथ में वो दवाई थी, जिस पे हमारी उम्मीद टिकी थी कि शायद ये दवाई पापा को थोड़ा और टाइम दे दे. और आप ये सोचो कि जिस डॉक्टर ने कहा था कि कुछ घंटे और कुछ दिनों की बात है, तो ये हफ्ते तो निकले जा रहे थे, हमें नहीं पता कैसे. However, there was one catch. These pills had to be swallowed directly. They couldn't be crushed or mixed in food. They had to be consumed immediately. Leaving them in the mouth could result in losing their potency. As Dad had lost his appetite and was finding it difficult to swallow easily, getting him to take the medication in the required manner was a challenge. In addition to the new medication, we were also administering some Ayurvedic medicine that had been couriered from Mumbai, India. So वो कहावत होती है ना कि जब बादाम थे तो दांत नहीं थे, और अब दांत हैं तो बादाम नहीं है. अब मेडिकेशन हाथ में आई तो मतलब इतनी लेट हो चुका था कि पापा से बेसिक फंक्शंस लाइक स्वॉलोइंग भी बहुत मुश्किल से होता था. और वो पिल काफी बड़ी पिल थी, और उस पिल को ना आप क्रश करके दे सकते थे, ना किसी में डिसॉल्व करके दे सकते थे. उस पिल को डायरेक्टली ही स्वॉलो करना है. इनफैक्ट मुंह में भी अगर रखो और वो अंदर मुंह में डिसॉल्व हो जाए, तो दैट मेडिकेशन वुड लूज इट्स पोटेंसी. सो नाउ again we are faced with another challenge कि अब पेशेंट है, क्योर मिल गया, दवाई हाथ में है, लेकिन पेशेंट अब swallow नहीं कर सकता. So we are open to trying anything that was recommended in hopes of providing some relief and support for Dad. On the day the cancer medication arrived, Dad was extremely weak and restless. We had to call 911 for emergency assistance to get him to the hospital. Once there, he was admitted, and during the COVID pandemic, only patients were typically allowed inside. However, an exception was made, and my sister was allowed to stay with Dad as his caregiver. Back in the days, lockdown के time, बहुत strict policy थी कि सिर्फ patient hospital में रह सकता है, patient के साथ कोई और allowed नहीं था. But they made an exception, वो भी cancer ward में, जहाँ immunity cancer ward को तो बिल्कुल ही वो lockdown करके रखते थे. Because of the nature of the ward. But they made an exception, and my sister was allowed to stay. We sent the medication to the hospital, hoping that the medical staff would be able to get Dad to swallow the pill as required. Despite their efforts to stabilize him under medical care, they faced the same challenge. Dad was simply unable to swallow the pill and kept it in the corner of his mouth. The pill was dissolving in his saliva, which was not recommended, so they had to manually extract it from his mouth. The hospital staff, despite being experts, were unable to help him swallow the medication. Nurses and doctors tried their best, but all their attempts were in vain. Dad's condition did not improve, and we were feeling dejected, witnessing the struggle. First, there was no medication that matched. And then finally, we find a pill in a foreign land that did match, but now the patient couldn't consume it. During his moments of delusion, Dad said something that reminded my sister and me of great significance. It so happened that one day I was covering for my sister Pooja at the hospital and she was home. We were on the phone discussing Dad's situation, and she mentioned seeing a vision from Guruji which involved the yellow color, which involved the color yellow. We were trying to decipher what it meant, thinking of a yellow colored food. It could be halwa, besan roti, but then Dad uttered something in the background that sounded like the word rak. Rak is a protective arbor. It clicked in my mind. It was the rak that Guruji had given Dad over 2 decades ago. Guruji had instructed him to keep it away from everyone, and it was wrapped in a yellow cloth. When we were moving Dad to the US, I saw the package, but its content remained a mystery. Now we realized that the rak was what Dad needed. आप imagine करो संगत जी that I did not know कि गुरुजी ने मेरे father को रख दी थी because he said इसको अंदर रखना, किसी को इसके बारे में मत बताना. मुझे पहली बार उसका exposure तब हुआ when we were actually moving him from गुड़गांव to US. तो वो रख हम साथ लेकर आए and तब मैंने देखा कि वो येलो कपड़े में लिपटी पड़ी थी, लेकिन उस रख के अंदर क्या था, गुरुजी ने क्या ब्लेस करके दिया था, वो मुझे नहीं पता था. जब पूजा से मैं बात कर रही थी, मैं हॉस्पिटल में थी और मैं पापा की कंडीशन देख रही थी कि हाउ एक्सपर्ट्स आर आल्सो नॉट एबल टू गेट हिम टू स्वॉलो द पिल. बड़ी डिजेक्शन हो रही थी एंड पूजा kept saying कि गुरुजी मुझे कुछ पीला दिखा रहे हैं, मेरे विजन में कुछ पीला पीला आ रहा है, तो क्या मैं उनको किसी पीली चीज का भोग चढ़ाऊं, मैं हलवा बनाऊं, मैं क्या करूं, गुरुजी कुछ तो कहना चाह रहे हैं, something that's yellow. And Dad in his delusional state, he said something जिससे मेरे को relate हुआ, मेरे मन में वो रख वो वर्ड आ गया और मैंने पूजा को उसी टाइम फोन पे बोला कि रख येलो है, शायद गुरुजी रख का बोल रहे हैं कि इस रख को हॉस्पिटल लेकर आओ. So we quickly brought the rak, that protective armor, to the hospital and placed it under Dad's pillow. The next morning, a miracle happened. Dad swallowed the cancer pill. The hospital staff was astounded and couldn't scientifically explain the sudden change. But as his family, we knew what had happened. Over the next 10 days or so, Dad remained in the hospital and we could see significant improvement in his condition. He became more coherent, chatty, and we started to believe that this could be his turning point. During his hospital stay, Dad formed a close bond with the nurses named Hope and Faith, and one was a transgender Jew. He cherished their care and considered them a part of our family. Dad would often talk to them about Guruji and Shiv Puran, and they listened with genuine interest. Finally, on April 28th, 2021, the hospital decided to discharge him and send him home in an ambulance. So now Dad had started swallowing the pills. We saw progress. He had formed a very close bond with his caregivers, his nurses, और उनका नाम भी देखो क्या था, Hope and Faith. Nothing was a coincidence. मुझे तो अभी तक लगता है कि everything was set up by Guruji so that his last days could be filled with comfort. और मेरी वो जो जिद थी अपने गुरुजी से कि मेरे को पापा के साथ टाइम स्पेंड करना है, जो पॉसिबल ही नहीं होता. मैं इंडिया चले भी जाती, मैं गई थी 10-12 दिन के लिए गई थी, और मैं अगर मेरे बच्चे यहाँ थे, मेरी नौकरी यहाँ थी, मैं ज्यादा टाइम के लिए रुक ही नहीं सकती थी, और मैं अगर उनको छोड़कर आ जाती तो शायद हफ्ते या 2 हफ्ते और की बात होती, और पापा गुजर जाते. और कोविड के टाइम ऐसे फ्यूनरल्स होते थे संगत जी, फेस टाइम के ऊपर लोगों ने अपने नियर एंड डियर वंस के लास्ट राइट्स किए हैं बिकॉज दे कुडंट बी अराउंड देम. इतना मतलब इतने डिफिकल्ट टाइम्स थे. So 28th अप्रैल को बिकॉज पापा की हालत में काफी इम्प्रूवमेंट थी, उन्होंने पापा को घर भेज दिया. And we were overjoyed to welcome Papa back home. Additionally, the big swarups that we had left behind in Gurugram because they couldn't fit through an X-ray machine had also arrived at our doorstep a couple of days prior. तो ये स्वरूप जो हम छोड़कर आए थे, उनका भी कोई ना कोई जरिया बन गया था. वो एयरलिफ्ट होकर कुछ ही दिन पहले, आई थिंक 22 या 23 अप्रैल को, वो भी घर पहुंच गए थे. तो मुझे लगता था कि वो स्वरूप फिर अहेड ऑफ टाइम पापा को वापस वेलकम करने के लिए those swarups made it home. At 10:58 a.m. Eastern Time in the morning, my dad arrived. We eagerly played the welcome band, ready to receive him back home. Even our landscaper, who was in front of the house, saw my dad for the first time and complimented his smile, saying, "Your dad looks so happy." Dad was brought out by paramedics wearing a smile and his hands folded in a namaste position. We welcomed him warmly, and then the family guided the staff to the bedroom on the ground level where Dad was staying. They made him comfortable on the bed and left. I still vividly remember that I had a work-related conference call starting at 11 a.m., so I went to my office to join that. The rest of the family stayed with Dad. During that time, my dad asked my mom for some milk and a cookie. He was talking. We felt like this was the best we had seen him in a while. He even spoke on the phone to my sister's husband, reassuring him, "I will be fine soon." However, within just a few minutes, about 15 minutes to be precise, I heard my sister yelling urgently, "Aarti, hang up and come right now. Something happened to Papa." I immediately dropped the call, ran to my dad's room. To our utter shock and disbelief, Dad had stopped breathing. No one knew what had happened. It was so sudden and shocking. How could he be talking 1 minute and then the next minute not breathing with his heart stopped? So, Dad was discharged on 28th April. And again, I think I was very persistent that I wanted my dad to come back home. He did come back home. He came back home coherent. My landscaper saw my father and he said, "Your dad looks very happy." वो जब 10:58 पे पहुंचे, we were all outside ready to receive him. हमने वेलकम बैंड प्ले किया उनको रिसीव करने के लिए. पापा को अंदर लेकर आए, उनको लिटाया बिस्तरे पे. And he spoke to my brother-in-law. He asked my mother कि मेरे को थोड़ा सा दूध दे दे और एक बिस्किट दे दे. और ये जैसी डैड सिचुएट हो गए, मैंने कहा चलो अब मॉम एंड पूजा वहां पर है, तो मैं अपनी कॉन्फ्रेंस कॉल अटेंड कर लेती हूँ. और 15 मिनट में मेरे को अपनी बहन की जोर की आवाज आती है कि फोन नीचे रखो, पापा को कुछ हो गया है. मैं दौड़े दौड़ी कमरे में गई और पापा ऐसे करके बेहोश पड़े थे. और मुझे यकीन नहीं आया कि अभी 15 मिनट पहले वी वर सो फिल्ड विद होप. हाउ डिड दिस हैपन? In a state of panic, we made another 911 SOS call, and within 5 to 7 minutes, the paramedics showed up again. They asked us all to vacate the room as they needed to perform CPR on Dad. We went downstairs crying and anxious to Guruji's darbar at home. My sister Pooja was inconsolable, hysterical, and in her heightened emotional state, she saw Dad's face appear in Guruji's swaroop at home. She noticed a clear image on Guruji's forehead, which was hard for her to control. Meanwhile, the medical team tried to revive Dad's heartbeat with 2 rounds of CPR, but unfortunately, they were not successful. As we looked at each other, it became evident that Dad had left us. In desperation, we prayed feverishly and frantically, hoping for a miracle to bring him back. The pain of losing a loved one is indescribable, and one can never be fully ready for such a loss. So we called when Dad stopped breathing, his heart stopped beating. We called 911. Within a couple minutes, they were back again, and they were like, "Everybody get out of the room. We have to put him on the floor. We have to do a CPR." 2 बार उन्होंने CPR करने की कोशिश करी और वो हार्ट बीट को रिवाइव नहीं कर पा रहे थे. और हम इसी कमरे में, बेसमेंट में, we are all praying, and my sister was in a different state. Like उसको पता नहीं क्या हो गया था और उसको क्या दिख रहा था और वो दहाड़े मार मार के रो रही थी और उसको कंट्रोल होना मुश्किल हो गया था. एंड शी सेड, वो देखो गुरुजी के मत्थे में मुझे पापा का पूरा फेस नजर आ रहा है. और हमारी ये प्रेयर्स थी कि गुरुजी कुछ भी करो, ऐसे नहीं पापा जा सकते. Prayers were answered when minutes later they said they revived him and would rush him back to the hospital to put him on life support. और गुरुजी का वो स्वरूप जहां गुरुजी ने वो लाइट ग्रीन कलर का चोला पहना है, उस स्वरूप की मैं बात कर रही हूँ जिसमें पूरा पापा का फेस उनके फोरहेड पे बन गया. तो minutes later, they were able to get the heartbeat back by Guruji's grace, and they said, we are rushing him back to the hospital and we'll have to put him on life support. I believe he came home only because we were praying daily for Dad's return, and Guruji made that happen against all odds. Every single morning, I would wake up and look at Guruji, and all I would say was, Guruji, Papa, Guruji का एक स्वरूप मेरे कमरे में लगा हुआ है. और जब भी मैं बिस्तरे से निकलती थी, मेरे मुंह से एक ही वर्ड वो रट निकलती थी, गुरुजी पापा. और आई थिंक उसी जिद का मान रखने के लिए गुरुजी did bring Dad back, because I do believe that he wanted my father on a different plane, doing something else, being his ADC, as Guruji had said, and it was my mo that was keeping him here. That day was unnerving, with too many swings in just one day. We did not want to see Papa intubated. I still remember there was a satsang on May 1st in Pennsylvania. Divya auntie ke ghar pe satsang tha, mujhe abhi tak yaad hai. And that day his tubes were removed. We were all so thrilled to see Papa breathe on his own, again off the ventilator. तो 28 को life support पे डाला. And then after 2 days, his tubes were removed and he was breathing on his own. He opened his eyes and we all surrounded him with the hospital staff. And as the hospital staff, removed the tubes, they did it like a ceremony where we were all invited to watch the tubes come off. His vitals were fine. He was stable, but alas, that lasted only 26 hours. Yes, those tubes did come out, but after 26 hours, he had to be put back on life support again. We got a call the next day that he had to be put on ventilator again, and he couldn't breathe on his own. And since then, every single day, we were asked about when we wanted to finally remove the tubes. Every day after that was spent in the hospital in hopes of a miracle, but the cancer was ravaging through his body. It was not the other organs or his vitals that were the problem. Even if they supported his breathing artificially and kept his vitals stable, the cancer was eating him up. Seeing Papa in this condition was nerve-wracking. We would all take turns to be with him and talk to him. It was evident that he could hear us, but he couldn't respond back to us. We had the mantra job playing 24/7 in the ICU ward. In fact, the staff said that they wanted that for the other 29 rooms they had on that floor. Those were the days of simply having a monologue with Papa. We missed hearing his vibrant and ever so commanding voice. Papa was put back on the ventilator. We could see his eye movement. We would spend days talking to him, and it was a one-way conversation because Papa वापस बात नहीं कर पा रहे थे. And we really missed hearing his, voice ring in our ears. During those days, we would spend time reflecting on things that my father always said. He would say, spread forward Guruji ka naam and calm, his name and mission, spread his love, his light, connect more and more Sangat to him and his path. He repeated this to us personally, and this was the same message that he shared in his satsangs generally as well. Time was crawling, and each day the medical staff would ask us, when should we pull the plug? Guruji had given us enough time to mentally prepare ourselves, as this was now the writing on the wall. Anyone who comes must go, and death is the biggest reality. In the meantime, another auntie from India, Gauri, had reached out saying that she does shringars on Guruji's swarups, and if I wanted one, I should order one quickly. In my mind, I had started prepping for my dad to leave us, and for that, I had ordered a new swarup that will be used for the prayer services in hopes that it'll arrive overseas on time. So एक गौरी आंटी हैं, वो गुरुजी का एक वर्ल्ड वाइड ग्रुप है, उसकी एडमिन भी हैं. She reached out to me that मैं गुरुजी के स्वरूप पे श्रृंगार करती हूँ, अगर आपको मंगवाना है। तो मेरे मन में एक चाव थी कि गुरुजी का एक खूबसूरत सा स्वरूप जिस पे उनके चोले पे शी इज गोना पुट Swarovskis, वो फ्रेम करके लगवाएंगे। बिकॉज मैंने अपने माइंड में प्लान कर लिया था कि पापा का मेमोरियल होगा इन द नेक्स्ट few weeks, and if the Swaroop comes on time, so we will use the Swaroop. Guruji had not taken Dad because we were still holding on to him very strongly. I started to get random messages again from Sangat from different parts of the world. General Kapur will be okay. He has work to do on the other planes, but his daughter is not letting him go. Guruji is saying, stop worrying. Despite hearing this, it was so hard, and he had to bestow the strength on us to muster the courage to let him go. संगत जी, मुझे रैंडम मैसेजेस आने शुरू हो गए। एक पूजा आंटी हैं, आई थिंक वो कुवैत में है। रैंडम एरिया कोड जिसको मैं पहचानती भी नहीं थी, व्हाट्सएप मैसेजेस आते थे कि गुरुजी कह रहे हैं टू नॉट वरी अबाउट जनरल कपूर, और we should just release that जिसे कहते हैं वो मोह का क्लच, जिसमें स्पेशली मैंने अपने फादर को बहुत ज्यादा टाइटली पकड़ के रखा था। On the morning of May 17th, 2021, we decided to remove all the tubes and relieve Papa. The doctor told us that it is just a matter of a few minutes probably, and he will pass. All day, he was breathing peacefully on his own, and all of us had gathered around Papa. The day went by, and at night, only one person could stay back, so I did. That night was a tough one. I sat on a chair watching Dad, knowing that he can stop breathing any second. It was a Monday evening, and I told my dad aloud, Papa, do you remember 20 some years ago when you and I went to Guruji and it was just us and no one else? Today it's the same thing. It's just us here. So please don't quit tonight and keep breathing. We don't want to make that phone call at night in the middle of the night. This is the actual conversation I'm having with my father. I was sitting on the chair holding his hand, और मैंने हिंदी में उनको ये बोला, ऐसे पापा आपको याद है कि आज भी मंडे रात है, आज से 20 साल पहले गुरुजी ने सिर्फ हम दोनों को बुलाया था और आज भी सिर्फ हम हैं। तो आप अपनी सांस लेनी मत बंद करना, क्योंकि ट्यूब्स उन्होंने 17 सुबह ही हटा दी थी और उन्होंने कहा कि कुछ एनी मिनट ही कैन गो। पर पूरा दिन वो पीसफुली ब्रीथ करते रहे, और वो रात जब मैं अकेली थी, मेरे को रात को डर लग रहा था कि व्हाट इफ ओवरनाइट ही गिव्स अप एंड ही स्टॉप्स ब्रीदिंग। और मैं पापा को ये बोल रही हूँ, पापा रात को नहीं आपको जाना, मैं रात को मम्मी को फोन करके नहीं जगाना चाहती। और इतना संगत जी, मेरे पास आई कैन नॉट, मतलब मैंने ये लिख तो दिया है, पर मैं जस्टिफाई नहीं कर सकती और मैं बयान नहीं कर सकती कि क्या गुजर रही थी मेरे ऊपर। I did not leave him alone for a second until the night staff change happened and they came to the room. I was relieved to take a quick bio break. मतलब मैं बाथरूम जाने से भी डर रही थी कि क्या अगर मैं बाथरूम गई और पीछे से उन्होंने सांस लेनी छोड़ दी। In fact, that night, some sangat, unka bhi naam Aarti hai, she came down outside the hospital to give me langar because they were not allowed to come up, and I refused to go down, thinking that what if his heart stopped beating when I went down to get the langar prasad. So I stayed by him the entire night. That was gruesome for me, and I wasn't alone at all. My family, my ex-husband Vikram, friends, everyone lent an ear to provide an emotional support. The morning of May 18th, Tuesday, the entire family arrived to be with Dad. That fateful morning, I whispered in my dad's ears, holding his hands, that it was okay for him to go. I said, Papa, I know you have a bigger and better work to do with Guruji, and we will be okay. I promise you are free to go. 18 तारीख सुबह संगत जी, मैंने अपने पापा का हाथ पकड़ा और मैंने उनके कानों में ये बात दोहराई कि मुझे पता है पापा, गुरुजी आपका वेट कर रहे हैं और यहाँ पर सब ठीक रहेंगे, मैं सबका ख्याल रखूंगी, आप किसी चीज की फिक्र मत करना, आप बस फ्री होकर आप जाओ. And seconds after those words were spoken, it was approximately 11:11 a.m. Eastern time. We saw a straight line on the monitor, and he breathed his last. Pooja and I saw a silver spark come out of his head, rise and leave the room. Sangaji, I cannot tell you what it was to see a little silver, इतनी सी चीज, जैसे मैचस्टिक का बुरा का जो पोर्शन होता है, ब्लैक पोर्शन, वो ऐसे पापा के हेड से निकलकर, मुझे लगता है वो उनकी रूह थी, सीलिंग तक गई और उसके बाद वो कमरे से चले गई. And we saw it with our eyes. We saw this with our bare eyes, and that was his soul leaving his body through his head. Within seconds, it left our sight. We stood there, howling inconsolably. He was gone. He left us behind in this worldly ocean, but he was in a better place now, at his lotus feet, relieved from all the worldly sufferings. He played his part to the hilt while he was here, as a husband, as a father, as a soldier, and as a Guru Sangat. So with this, I finished my reading. So this was all about May 18th, 2021, when I saw our father leave us. And I am so grateful to Guruji for all the extension that he gave, the moments we could spend together, hoping against hopes when no one saw this coming in, no one expected this. In fact, जब पहली बार भी पापा का कैंसर डायग्नोज हुआ था, स्टेज 4 पे ही हुआ था और कोई साइन, कोई सिम्टम कुछ नहीं था पहले कि पकड़ में पहले आ जाता. From that time, people had started to say कि ये तो इतना aggressive stage पे है ये already कि 6 महीने से ज़्यादा मिल ही नहीं सकता. And गुरुजी ने सांसें बख्शी और गुरुजी तब तक बख्शते रहे जब तक मैंने अपने फादर को खुद नहीं बोला कि आप जा सकते हो. And these are some of other pictures जो इस किताब में है. ये गुरुजी का बड़ा मंदिर, यहाँ आगे मम्मा इस पिक्चर में, and this is Guruji's bedroom in my house. So शुक्राना गुरुजी.